I'm Laura Caldwell, and you're watching Author's Voice.
Everybody, and welcome to Author's Voice, a virtual book signing network. This is Solved, where we talk about crime and mystery, both fiction and true crime, and I'm Libby Hellmann, your host. I'm the author of 15 compulsively readable thrillers, which I hope you'll check out. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of talking to an old friend who is so overachieving that she can't stop, even if she wanted to. Laura Caldwell is started out as a trial attorney, but she is also an author, an educator, a lifesaver, a philanthropist, and a motivational speaker. She's a former civil trial attorney who's the founding director of Life After Innocence. She's also a published author of 14 novels and 1 nonfiction book. Well, actually 2 now. Her most recent work is called Anatomy of Innocence, Stories of the Wrongfully Convicted, which are brought to life in collaboration with best-selling mystery and thriller writers in this incredibly touching and very, very moving collection of stories. And it is published by Norton, by Live Right, that's the imprint. It's $26.95, and we would love for you to press the button right underneath your screen and get a signed, so that you can buy it right now and get a signed copy of it. I know you're going to want to get it at the end of our discussion. And also, if you have questions for Laura, please don't hesitate to press the button below your screen and send in a written question and let us know your first name and where you're from, and we will try to get it on the air and get Laura to answer it. So, with all of that, welcome, Laura.
Thank you very much. It's a nice intro.
Thank you. I try. I try. Before we get into the meat of the stories, I saw that you had been honored as a humanitarian. Did you ever have any idea you would be so honored?
No, and I am really honored to be accepting next week at Northwestern's Center on Wrongful Conviction an award for contributing to the Innocence movement, and it's a thrill, and it's interesting. We're sitting in this bookstore amongst great kind of lawyers and writers of the past, and you hope that maybe your name gets in there.
I think you will be a little more than a footnote, I promise. All right, let's talk about how this all began for you. How did you get the idea? How did you get interested? How did it all happen that you got involved with the Life After Innocence Project in the first place?
So I was a civil lawyer. I represented physicians who were sued. I was a litigator, and I wrote on the side. Eventually, I became a partner, then left to write novels, and was really plan on having the law as very much of a backup, had sort of moved on to writing when I had the opportunity to hear about a case involving a young man named Jovan Mosley, who was in a Cook County holding cell for 6 years without a trial, no trial date on the books.
And this was your very first exposure.
This was my very first exposure, was after I'd left the law, while I was writing novels, and then became aware of how many people in jail are innocent. And there's also a lot of people in county who are not convicted, who may or may not be innocent.
We're in Chicago, so if we talk about county, we're talking probably about Cook County.
Right. But in general, we call county like your local sort of lockup. You're in county. There are people all over this country who are in county, and they'll be there for 5, 6 years like this and never have even been charged, or excuse me, never even been convicted yet. So I represented this gentleman with a great lawyer here in town named Catherine O'Daniel. on this murder trial. And when we were able to help him, he got a not guilty, which was the right verdict. And then what we saw was how hard it would be to start over. If you've been innocent, if you've been in prison, if you've been in jail, when you're trying to fight your fight, it's a very all-encompassing, surreal thing. So when you get out, it's even more sort of surreal. And what we learned was that there's so much more work that needs to be done, but there are these amazing innocence organizations throughout our country, which I really hope people support. The Center on Wrongful Convictions, whatever their local innocence organization is, they're trying so hard to get people out of jail who are innocent. And we said, can we help you by focusing on what happens when they get out? What is the after piece of this? Can we help get their criminal records cleared? Can we help help them start over? So that's how Life After Innocence came about.
And you also wrote a book on Jovan's experiences, right?
I did. Long Way Home.
I remember that.
A young man lost in the system and the two women who found him.
Now, have you written any fiction in between?
Yes. So my Izzy McNeil books,
Right.
and
Which
you
I
and
love.
we talk about Ellie and our favorite people who we write and who we
Yeah.
love.
Yeah.
And Izzy McNeil is,
She's you. You finally went to...
she's my avatar. She's
Right.
my
Right.
bigger, curvier, smarter, braver me.
Yeah, I remember when you started writing her, because
talked
you were a little afraid of making her so much like you at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And that's why you've done other...
Now I'm not afraid. I think
Yeah.
we just bleed everything. You can't extract the characters from you anymore.
Okay, so you were writing Izzy, and then you wrote A Long Way Home, and then how did this Anatomy of Innocence come to be?
So Anatomy of Innocence really was born out of the friendship and camaraderie and support of mystery writers who, as I started doing innocence work, and you and I would go to conferences where we can help talk about craft and getting your book out there and new formats. And every time I was at one of these conferences, all these amazing authors would take me aside and say, I think it's great what you're doing, this innocence work. How can I help? So, Lee Child, I said, you could get out your checkbook, contribute to my organization. But I wasn't, people kept saying it over and over, how could I help, how could I help? And I really couldn't view of a way necessarily where fiction thriller writers could necessarily, unless they were lawyers maybe, could really do much for the people who were in jail, who were innocent and struggling to be heard. For a long time, I couldn't see how those sort of crossed.
And then?
Well, eventually the ideas sort of came to us. Les Klinger is the editor, my co-editor on this project, and we just started talking about, I wonder if we could engage some of these amazing authors, like Lee Child,
Sarah
Paretsky, Phil Margolin. Could we ask them to focus on a true, so this would be different a lot of times for them as well, right? They've got fictional characters. If Phil Margolin wants, he can just crash a plane into downtown Portland in one of his books. I hope that never happens. No. Point being, as fiction writers, we're always pulling anything out of the air. And it's a little more challenging to say, can you write about somebody who is here and around?
Right.
So the thought is...
And just for our viewers who don't know who Les Klinger is, he is the author and editor of many collections. Wasn't he a Sherlockian?
Correct.
He
Won an
started
Edgar
out-
Award for various annotated Sherlock Holmes mysteries and other
Right, and he
fine
does
books.
other collaborations and stories and collections. He's pretty well known. He's out on the West Coast.
Right. So we started talking to people, and we really didn't. We had to turn people down because so many people had asked over the years. And once we started piecing this together, we still weren't quite sure. We got the concept that, okay, for example, I have a friend who's an exoneree. An exoneree is someone who's been exonerated, someone who is innocent, convicted, and eventually exonerated of a crime.
What percentage of prisoners do you think are falsely convicted?
The estimate is that about 5%, which means there are hundreds of thousands of people in jail who are innocent.
Wow.
And I think 5% might be a little low. I mean, frankly, this is a human system. I think what we really want to get up front with this project about too is not just talking about wrongful convictions, but talking about why they happen and what it feels like. And really, we're not trying to say our criminal justice system or our legal system is anything but what it is. Frankly, it's a human system. This is not a conveyor belt where we put in like plastic and stamp out widgets
Right.
and quality control goes, okay, those are all look good. These are humans being judged by humans, processed by humans. It's literally going to fail. Of course it is sometimes. So 5% is the, I think, generous estimate of how many people might be innocent. And that would be, we have 2.2 million people.
How did you choose the exonerees to focus on?
So first we chose people who no one questioned whether or not they were innocent. They've been, their case has been overturned, they've been declared innocent often in their state, depending on if their state has a process for that. So first of all, we looked for that. And then we kind of had to figure out, how can we make this reflective? How could a bunch of stories by mystery authors and other best-selling authors and writers, how could those stories written about exonerees, is there any way it could hang together as one instead of just a collection? And a random collection is just as good, but we wondered, could they somehow hang together? So once we had the exonerees and then we had the writers, then I kind of came up with, we talk about the stages of grief or the stages of this or that.
The notes. Did you write all the case notes? I wondered about that.
My law students contributed a great deal as well.
Yeah.
But yes, so what we tried to do was show, I guess the concept of the book is, what does it feel like to be someone who's wrongfully convicted? What does it feel like to be in their skin? What does it feel like to be in the soul? And so each writer was asked to do something quite contained. All these exonerees have stories like you can't believe. The characters and plot points, it's not plot points, we talk like fiction writers, but all these stories are so crazy.
Well, it almost did sound like fiction when I was reading it. They all did hang together really well. I'm not sure you're going to like what I thought hung them together, but it was basically what I picked up was that the police were going to get their man, or woman in some cases, because you do deal with some females who were imprisoned. And so they see a guy and they just do whatever they have to make him the victim. Or the perpetrator.
I think it's true to say that, like any of us, once we've made a decision, we tend to marshal the facts toward that decision. So once a police officer, and I call myself in one of my previous books a cop groupie. I'm a big fan of cops. I
am too. I've gone from, how did I say it? Cops have gone from pigs to pals.
That's perfect, as they should. And we have some great police officers. What everybody knows is that if you've made a decision that this kid did this person did Y or Z, once you've made that decision, everything's going toward that. So if you are unfortunate enough to be caught in the crosshairs of a decision that's been made, whether it's you or not, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, and it's almost as if there is absolutely no focus on the individual. He's just the subject. He's going to be the one we're going to get. And,
right.
And you don't even, the law does, well, I'm generalizing here. So the law doesn't care about the turmoil in his or her life that's
certainly
happening
not,
as a
because
result.
in general, we don't care about the turmoil of someone who is guilty. And so if you're operating on the fact that this person killed someone, we don't, in fact, care. A lot of times we're supposed to. Due process, the Constitution says everyone's supposed to be tried fairly, that we're supposed to go through these processes in a fair way so that you're sentenced fairly, that you're arrested fairly, you're tried fairly. But But what I think we also really wanted to show is how it can almost happen to anyone. So if you recall...
That first story about the woman.
Yeah.
Oh, tell us about that.
Gut-wrenching, isn't it?
Well, all of them were gut-wrenching, I was going to get into that, but go ahead, tell.
So Gloria is a California exoneree who is featured in our first story, and she was a white brunette law student in her 30s. Like literally, statistically, that's probably the last person who's going to be, we think, might be wrongfully convicted of something. A white law student in her 30s in California? Like
right.
that's usually not like the, whoa, you got to be careful, sister. She was at home fooling around with a boyfriend in the midday. Everyone's going to run back to work. She's going to run to school. Knock on the door. Will you go with us? Of course, the law student's going to say to the cops, sure, what's this about? Ma'am, just come with us. She never went home. She was charged with murder, and she did well over a decade in jail.
When the product came in, when the cases came in from the authors that you had chosen, were you kind of blown away by how powerful they were?
Well, frankly, at first we were blown away by how big the stories were, because every author felt, I know you just wanted me to focus on, like we asked, we want to focus on what was the knock on the door? When did you get accused? What did it feel like to sit in court and have a little girl point at you and say you did these things to her when you didn't? What does it feel like to have someone say guilty when in fact you're not? Lee Child wrote with an exoneree about what's it feel like the first time you're in prison and you're...
Right.
Yeah, so we wanted someone to show all these, and so we said, we just want you to do this little thing. But so many great friendships. John Mankiewicz, who's one of the head writers for House of Cards and now Bosch, he became very good friends with Jerry Miller. We wanted them to focus on, there's a couple stories about what happens when people get out. Jerry Miller had the experience of being a sex offender after he served 26 years, and Barry Scheck and DNA only exonerated him after he'd been home 2 years. So he has a morning where he wakes up with a wristlet and he is a registered sex offender. At the end of the day, he's being raced from one press conference to another. Wow. We just wanted to show how sometimes crazy these journeys can be. So we told John that's what to write. They became very good friends. John sends in, oh, no, but I want to say this and I want to make sure they know this. Yeah. So there was a lot of editing encouragement.
I get it.
The double E's.
I wanted to ask you a couple questions specifically about a couple of specific stories. When Sarah wrote the story on David Bates, that was in the John Burge era.
Correct.
Right, in Chicago, and he was a notorious abuser of victims' rights and everything. Were there other districts besides Area 2 that were as notorious in Chicago as his?
We've all areas have had their highlights and lowlights. I think that's why we don't call them areas now. We call them districts now.
Districts, right.
Mostly it wasn't necessarily an area that stuck out as much as some detectives, other detectives, particularly in Chicago. And then frankly, some of the, again, prosecutors, hardest job, amazing people. We've had some really interesting cases where you just saw the same prosecutor over and over and over again who made up evidence, like faked it, hid it. And that was frankly distressing.
There was something else that distressed me, and that was the incentivized informants.
Yeah.
I mean, people who were promised money or reductions in their sentences if they'd testify against the exoneree, the person who was exonerated. I mean,
that's a tricky thing.
It seems like that should be illegal, but I guess it's not.
On one hand, though, we need, for the same reason that we need eyewitness testimony. For example, eyewitness testimony has a lot of problems. Mm-hmm. People's memories change, they get it wrong, they get coached. But if you and I run into each other, my car, your car, and no one else is around and there's no video, we have to be able to say, no, she crossed the center line. No, she did. We have to have our, and it's the same thing with incentivized witnesses. If you want someone who's already in jail and who's trying to keep his head down to say what he saw with this crime back then, you may have to say, I know you don't want to, and I know you could get in trouble, and I know it could cause a lot of problems for you, but I'll get you out of here a year early. So again, I see the reason for it, but it's just gone awry. There's a Colorado prosecutor who just came out last week, gives cars to witnesses. So, I mean, that just can't happen. Yes, so I think your point is, there's got to be some shape to it,
Sure. Absolutely, absolutely. The other question that comes up, most of the exonerees are African American, except for a couple. There was Kirk Bloodsworth and Ken
Winamanko.
I was a name I can't pronounce. They had fewer years in prison, weren't they? Didn't they?
That's interesting. I haven't really thought about it like that. You're right. It does seem. We did try to skew the numbers of exonerees to fit with what we see represented, so that we do see more African American right now exonerees, although we're pretty sure that there are a lot of Hispanic and Spanish-speaking people who are in prison, and the Department of Justice is starting to recognize that. So, but you're right. So right now, it tends to be predominantly African American, Hispanic, but you know, we do feature women, and that it really, it no longer is something that just touches certain areas or certain races.
What advice would you give a potential subject when the knock on the door comes, or the police ask you to come down to the station? You know, people usually think, oh, well, I'm innocent, I'll cooperate. That can't possibly happen. What do you say to them?
It's a very, 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 very tricky question. It's really tricky because we all know sometimes, let's say you're pulled over by a nice officer who wants to talk to you. We all know that sometimes if you talk to that officer and you explain, this is what happened, all right, can you just watch it? If you sit there mute, you don't have to say anything to him. Now, particularly though, if you are taken into custody, it's impossible to do. No one is very good at this. You cannot say anything, and you've got to demand on a lawyer. And they can shuttle you around. It could take 5 days for you to see a lawyer, easily. So, but you just have to keep insisting. Now, that's almost an impossible standard.
It almost, yeah.
There's a video called "Don't Talk to the Cops." That is, it's from a lawyer and a civil rights lawyer and a defense lawyer, and he just says, you gotta zip it. But it's tough because a lot of times you just speaking to someone will get you out of it. I mean, I live behind the Chicago History Museum. My lovely CPD, I see them, the Chicago Police Department, a lot. I chat with them a lot. I mean, okay, maybe for me, it's like my dog is off leash. They could give me now, but I say, oh, I'm so sorry, she was over here. And I know people watching this are like, well, yeah, it's fine. You're a white lady. And good point. It's probably, maybe I have a better shot at talking myself out of it. But think if I went mute and I can't talk to you, I can't talk to you. Here's your ticket, lady.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean? So it's a very push-pull.
There's so much else I want to talk to you about. We may have to go to a part 2. But tell us about the Arthur Miller unpublished segment in the book, because I know that was something that made it a little special.
It really did. So Anatomy of Innocence is the first time that the Arthur Miller estate has approved an unpublished piece since his death. So we literally have the first and right now the only unpublished Arthur Miller piece. And thank you to the estate, they are amazing. That came through a very interesting channel. Rob Warden is the former director of Northwestern Law School's Center on Wrongful Convictions. They are the people, one of the best in Chicago and Illinois, who are trying to help people get out of jail who are innocent. And I was telling Rob about the book, and I said, you know, we're trying to show all the stages of a wrongful conviction. What's it like to be accused? What's it like when you hear guilty? What's it like when you go in? What's it like when you have to get yourself out? What's it like when maybe some lawyer out of the blue comes out? And we wanted to have a chapter where the community sometimes helps you get out. And we were in particular talking to the West Memphis 3, which is a case out of Memphis, Tennessee, where 3 boys at the time were convicted of murder, essentially because they liked, I don't know, Black Sabbath, or they liked heavy metal, and therefore it was really stretching it. So everybody kind of knew these guys were innocent. Johnny Depp got on their case. Dixie Chicks came out and helped them. Eddie Vedder, all these celebrities and members of the community who were not legal in nature and supporters came out and helped them. And it was really that got them out. So all of a sudden I thought, okay, Johnny Depp, let's get Johnny Depp to write the piece about West Memphis 3, or let's get Eddie Vedder, or let's get Natalie from the Dixie Chicks. I was all excited, and then we realized technically they had been let out on what's called an Alford plea, which is where the court says we're gonna let you out, but you still have to plead guilty, and we'll let you continue to argue for your innocence.
Adjudicate for it.
So, but you're still taking a guilty plea.
Yeah.
So my dreams of Johnny Depp and I working together disappeared. And what I said to Rob Warden was, we need a piece, and I think we're just going to have to give it up. We wanted a piece where the community helps someone get out, but I can't find the right exoneree right now. And he was like, come back to my office. And he's got this file folder and a typed letter from Arthur Miller, who he had met years ago, who was an Innocence supporter, who knew it was a thing. I read his biography, and his love of the Innocence work was sort of 2 pages toward the back. Mm-hmm. But he really was a great Innocence supporter. He literally came out of the woodwork to help a New York 15-year-old boy whose mother had been brutally murdered. They couldn't figure out who did it. As we talked about earlier, unfortunately, they decided it was him. Within 6 months, he was tried and convicted and was on his way to prison when the community ran, literally followed the van. They got him back, and Arthur Miller came on board, helped get him a new trial, and he had written this piece about it. And here it was sitting in Rob's desk for decades, and he said, in the thing it said, if you could ever use this. And so we contacted the estate, and that's how it got in there.
Amazing.
So I edited Arthur Miller,
Of course.
technically.
Yeah, you said.
I moved a comma.
Okay,
One
good
comma.
for you. There you
Yeah.
go. One of the things that Governor George Ryan did right was to stop all executions.
Amen.
Did that have anything to do with Life After Innocence, or can you say you think you've saved lives because of it? Or what kind of an impact do you think that's had, at least here in Illinois?
Well, I think what he knew and what we saw, that was the Illinois Torture Commission that was convened at Governor Ryan's request. Scott Turow, one of our friends and fabulous, who's also contributed forward in the book, was one of the authors. And what they found was that there were a fair amount of people on death row who were in fact innocent. And I think the thought was, wow, we can't keep going with this death penalty program if we don't know that we're getting it right. And so I've had the pleasure of working with some of the gentlemen who were released under that. Ronnie Kitchen, who's just a wonderful man. And so,
I know that name.
Yeah.
yes, he's lovely and succeeding. So I think that was a fantastic decision. I think it's led other states to look at theirs. I understand a lot of the reasons why people want the death penalty. I super get it. I've been the victim of a crime myself. I want closure. I want that taken care of. But if we cannot get it right, there just really doesn't seem to be a way that we can just, continue to do that.
Well, we are kind of running out of time. You are so passionate about this. And since I've known you, which has been almost 20 years, you've been passionate about everything you do.
Yeah.
What's next?
I kind of, in a perfect world, I really would like to do a Good Wife Meets Empire show called After Innocence and explore the fascinating lives of these exonerees
I'll write
because...
an episode for you.
Done! Actually,
We should do that.
we really should do that.
Yeah, we really should.
And maybe we do a like this, but everybody can write their own.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Well, all right. But anyway.
You've seen it born here, people.
That would be so much fun. Thank you, Laura. You've been terrific as
Thanks for
usual.
having me.
And I wish we had more time. There's plenty more that I wanted to ask you, but we are running out of time. I do want to remind you to please push a little button under your screen and order Anatomy of Innocence. Laura will sign them right after the show, and we'll get them right out to you. And we want to thank your publisher for making all of these wonderful books available. And I'd like to just take a minute to let you know what's coming up on Author's Voice in the next couple weeks. We have A House Divided, Michael Hogan with Abraham Lincoln and Mexico. And I didn't know Abraham. That's an interesting. Again, on A House Divided, we have Ron Chernow, who wrote a book called Grant, whom I assume is Ulysses S. Grant. House Divided will also feature Gordon Ray, On to Petersburg. And let's see, let me go back and tell you that Abraham Lincoln in Mexico is October 27th at 5 p.m. Grant with Ron Chernow is November 1st at 2 p.m. A House Divided On to Petersburg is November 1st at 3 p.m. That's a double feature for you that day. Stranger Than Fiction, Adam Gussow, Beyond the Crossroads, November 4th at 1 p.m. Another Stranger in Fiction, Ed Gordon, Divided on D-Day. That's going to be November 9th at 5 p.m. A House Divided will have Graham Peck, Making an Anti-Slavery Nation, November 11th at 12 p.m. So there's a lot to look forward to as the temperature gets colder. We will be rearing to go and very hot. So come on back to Author's Voice again and look on the internet, look on our website to find out exactly when those shows are on. Thank you all for being with us, and we'll see you again real soon.